Tyler from Aspire Sports, and I'm going to be giving you my early, very early Week 10 start and sits. Now, these aren't going to be like obvious, hey, start Dalvin Cook. Obviously, you're going to be starting Dalvin Cook, right? These are going to be more like guys that are on the fringe. Maybe you're really contemplating here. Maybe you need somebody to start if you're in a pinch, especially one of these quarterbacks here. But if you have any comments and maybe you have your own start and sit questions, leave it in the comments below. We'll answer any questions you have. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get into my first start, and that's going to be Tua here. Tua right now is playing against the Chargers this week, who are giving up the fourth most fantasy points to the quarterbacks this season. So I think he's in a good spot. And also, I'm just on the Tua bandwagon this season. I love him for the rest of the season. I think I'm not saying he's good as Russell Wilson, but he's comparable in the sense that he's efficient, he can move around the pocket and extend plays, and if you leave him alone in like man coverage, he can get out there and pick up chunk yards. So I love him for the rest of the season, and I think he has a really good matchup. Start. Now this next one is not going to be pretty, okay? I'm telling you, Nick Foles, he has not been good in real life fantasy this season. I think in real life fantasy, in real life football, he hasn't been that good. But I think in fantasy, it has been terrible. This week gets Minnesota, who Minnesota on the season has been giving up the fifth most passing yards and 19 touchdowns, which is second most on the season right now. So I think he's in a good spot, possibly no David Montgomery. He threw the ball 52 times last week. I expect him to throw it quite a bit this week as well. And if you're desperate, okay? If you're desperate, I'm only saying if you really need a quarterback this week, I really don't think he's that bad of a streaming option. And let's get into the next one here, and that's going to be Kareem Hunt. Now I say him because it hasn't been that great as good as people thought it was going to be with Chubb going down. I think he's going to be better with Chubb in the offense. This team wants to run the football. Wyatt Teller's been a little bit banged up as well, their guard. So they're getting healthier. Now they have Hooper coming back as well. I just think going forward, this offense is going to look better. Plays Houston right now, who are giving up the second most rushing yards on the season. I think that they're just going to be a team for the rest of the season. They wanted to be this team, like a run first team in the beginning of the season. Going forward, I think that they're going to get back to the roots and they're just going to pound the rock. So Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb are top 15 plays for me this week. So let's go into the next one, and the next one's going to be JD McKissic. Now, Antonio Gibson, he's not a bad play, but I do think JD McKissic this week is honestly going to be like a top 25 play in borderline top 20 play in PPR leagues. He had 14 targets this week. 14 targets this past week. He outsnapped Antonio Gibson by 20 snaps. So you have check down Alex out there who's going to be running this offense, who's going to probably, I don't expect 14 targets, but could probably get double digits targets here, like 10 targets this week. So I think he's a pretty solid play, especially in PPR leagues if you need a running back this week. And he's also only rostered in 27% of leagues, so he might still be there. And if you're in a pinch, I think he's somebody who's good to add. The next would be Keenan Allen. Now, obviously, this is kind of like an obvious choice, but if you're kind of contemplating, you have some good wide receivers, I think he's like an absolute must start this week. Plays Miami, who honestly have been getting better, especially in the secondary this season. They're really not that bad. But the slot, Needman in the slot is one of the worst slot corners in the NFL. We saw Cooper Kupp had 21 targets not this past week, but the week before they went on their bye week and played Miami. So this is probably the best slot receiver in the NFL, if not like top three. He's going to have a beautiful matchup here. I think he's going to have a really good week this week. Is honestly like top five in my opinion at the wide receiver position this week. So he's an absolute must start. Let's go ahead into the next one, and that's going to be Jerry Judy. Jerry Judy, I'm starting to get on the bandwagon a little bit. I was on Tim Patrick, but they changed this up with Jerry Judy. I mentioned this before. They took KJ Hamler, put him into the slot, and now have moved Jerry Judy outside. I went back and watched the film against Atlanta. This dude was open all day. Drew Lock missed some throws. He also got pressured a little bit, but his route running is superb. Like he's a very good route runner, and I think this Las Vegas team isn't that good in the secondary. I think this is a pretty good matchup for him, and I expect him to put up top 20 numbers or top 20 numbers this week. So let's go ahead into the next, and this is going to be tight end. My only tight end start wise is going to be Austin Hooper. Right now, he's only rostered in 42% of leagues, so he could possibly be there. I honestly think he's a top 10 fantasy tight end this week. I already talked about this, right? In the weeks, this was pre-Odell injury here, okay? So pre-Odell injury, he was averaging 7 targets a game, 5 catches, and 47 yards receiving, which really, that's not bad for a tight end on, this season with injuries and everything, and tight end just being a not very good position, right? But that's not bad. Throwing a touchdown one of those weeks, that's pretty good numbers there. Now gets no Odell, and this team wants to run the football, so they're going to be in like 12 personnel. I expect a lot, so he's going to be on the field quite a bit. I love his fantasy outlook going forward. Gets a Houston team that's giving up the 10th most fantasy points to the tight end position. Yes, I think Austin Hooper is a really solid play this week. Let's go into my sits here. And I got a sit here that you're probably going to disagree with. But this one, I think we could probably agree with a little bit here. So we have Cam Newton. Obviously, he looked pretty good against the New York Jets, but he hasn't thrown a passing touchdown since week 3. Week 3. Yes, he's run the ball in, but he's going to need to run the ball in to be a top 15 play this week against a Baltimore team that's giving up the second least passing, or I'm sorry, the seventh least passing yards on the season, but the second least passing touchdowns on the season. This is not a good matchup, and I think he's going to be a dud this week. So let's move on to my next person, and that's going to be Matthew Stafford. Matthew Stafford this week plays against Washington. Honestly, Washington hasn't been that bad as well. Washington this season is giving up the least passing yards in the NFL this season. They are giving up the 10th fewest fantasy points to the quarterback position this year, and no Kenny Golladay this week possibly. So I don't like Matt Stafford. If you have a better option, I would definitely go with it. Possibly you think Nick Foles? I think so. Honestly, I'd probably feel a little bit more comfortable going Nick Foles this week. And let's go into the running back position and talk about Derrick Henry. I think Derrick Henry is a sit this week. He's going to have a dud performance. Now, obviously, you can't sit him since you probably drafted him in the first round. Definitely drafted him in the first round. So you can't sit him, but right now, Indianapolis is the second best run defense in the NFL. Right there with the New Orleans Saints, actually. So, and I honestly think they're probably the best, though. So, this is a team that I expect like a similar number as last week 21 rushes, 60 yards, somewhere around that. You better hope he falls into the end zone, or else it's going to be a dead week. Sees no passing work whatsoever. So you're just basically relying on a touchdown because I don't think the yards are going to be there. So I know you probably can't sit him, but I hope you're not expecting a good game because it's not. And especially in like DFS, I wouldn't play him at all. Next, let's go into basically it's going to be all the San Francisco running backs here. I don't like any of them. None of them. Not after last week. You have Jerick McKinnon, his tired legs. We expected Hasty to be involved. Kyle Shanahan came out and said he looks good and all this stuff. And then Jerick McKinnon basically gets all the snaps, and he looked good as well. Honestly, he did look good. But no, thank you. I'm not trusting this backfield at all. It would not be surprising if he went hasty this week, just because I have no idea what's going on. I don't think Mostert's going to be back. I think they have a bye. Yeah, they have a bye week next week, so I don't expect him to be back. I expect McKinnon and Hasty again. I don't know what's going on with Tevin Coleman. Maybe he was placed on IR again. I honestly forget, but no thanks. I don't want any part of this. And they also played New Orleans, who has the best run defense in the NFL. So no thank you. And the next one here is going to be basically all of Cincinnati's receivers. Yes, I know. Pittsburgh didn't look that good last week. We get it. But you also have to consider a couple things. That was their third road game in a row. They came off a pretty emotional game against Baltimore, a win. And they've always downplayed to their competition. They're going to be at home against a divisional opponent in Cincinnati. I honestly expect them to kind of blow out Cincinnati if Ben plays. But I just don't like Tyler Boyd this week. I don't like really any of the wide receivers. I think you have to downgrade him. I think Joey Burrow is going to be running for his life in this game, so no thank you. I don't think any of them are really that good of plays this week. So got to downgrade him a little bit. Next, let's go into DJ Chark. Now, this is very dependent on if Alexander can play this week for the Packers. He had a concussion last week, so if Alexander does play this week, I don't like Chark at all. He's going to shadow him, has been the best shadow cover in the NFL this year, so no thanks, I'd be out. But if he doesn't play, then yes, I do like Chark. Go ahead and plug him in. I think he's going to be a really solid play, all dependent on Alexander's health. And hey, if you need updates, follow us on Twitter at Aspire Sports Show _. We'll give you yeah, we'll keep you updated. And let's go into the last one, and that's going to be Mark Andrews. Mark Andrews this year, in 5 games, has had less than 5 points. Last week, played Indianapolis. I said he was going to be a dud. Scored 3.7 points. Was a dud, right? And that was against the Colts and Indianapolis, who have given up the fewest fantasy points to the tight ends this season. And now he's going up against New England, who's given up the second fewest fantasy points to the tight ends this season. So I think he's going to have another dud performance. I don't like him at all. If you have a better option, go ahead and start him. But obviously, if there's nobody, you got to start him. But if you do, think about it. So that's it. If you have any start and sit questions that we can answer, please leave it in the comments below. We'll answer any questions you have. Follow us on all of our social medias, TikTok, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, whatever it may be, we're active. We'll answer any of your questions on there as well. So thank you. We appreciate your support and we appreciate you watching. Have a great day.